Thanks for downloading this episode of Cork Talk with me, Tim Atkin. A weekly conversation with some of the most famous people in the world of wine.
Martín Kaiser excels as both a viticulturist and a winemaker. Born and brought up in Mendoza, where he still works and lives, he's transformed the reds and whites of Doña Paula since he arrived in 2006, taking them back to their roots. Our fascinating chat covered everything from vegetarianism to climbing mountains, calcium carbonate to the joys of working with Malbec, and the differences between the Uco Valley and Luján de Cuyo. Hi Martín, how are you?
Hi Tim, how are you? Very well, thank you.
And you're in Mendoza, but not in the mountains for once, or in the winery. You're at home, I think, aren't you?
No, I arrived like half an hour ago from the mountains, and I'm at home now.
Okay, well, lovely to hear your voice. Tell us all about you. I mean, I know you were born and brought up in Mendoza, and almost everyone in Argentina is an immigrant or descended from immigrants. Where did the Kaisers come from? They sound German. Were they German?
Yes, my grandfather was German. Either if he was born in Jerusalem. It is a quite weird story because his father, so my grandfather, he had a tourism agency in Jerusalem for receiving people that wanted to visit the Holy Land. And that's where he met my grandmother. They had 6 kids. And then the First War started. And as long as they were, in that moment, Jerusalem was from the UK Empire. So they were caught prison for being German, and they went to a prisoner camp.
Yeah.
How do you say it? Yes.
A prisoner of war camp, yeah.
Yes, for many years. And then when the war ended, they were free again. They came back to Germany. But in that moment, remember the economy of Germany after the First World War was horrible. So they decided to sell their house in Stuttgart, and they bought a piece of desert in Mendoza. Not very good business. They came here to La Valle, the north of Mendoza, a very, very warm place with a lot of mosquitoes, some salty soil.
Brilliant.
And then my grandfather spent his whole life in that piece of land.
Planted grapes, right? Because he was a viticulturist, wasn't he?
Yeah. He was a viticulturist, yes, among other things like peaches, and he also had produced grass for feeding cows.
So he's like a farmer, really, yeah?
Like a farmer, yes. But he was very advanced. He bought a machine, and he made the service of this machine that cut and processed the wheat.
Yeah.
Because at that moment, one century ago, in Mendoza, we produced wheat more than in Buenos Aires. It was incredible.
Oh.
Yeah.
And your father was a farmer as well, or was your father more into grapes? Was he more of a viticulturist?
Well, he studied agronomic engineer. My grandfather, he didn't finish even the primary school. He didn't have the chance to do it. But my grandfather, he studied agronomic engineer, and he was he went through different kind of cultures, and he had a company of irrigation. But in the last decades of his life, he has been working with grapes and winemaking.
And so were you brought up in vineyards? Do you have early memories of being in vines?
Yes, I remember from very little to visit the every weekend with my father going to the farm. Yes.
And where was the farm? Was still in La Valle, was it?
No, my father's farm is in Rivadavia, so it's the east of Mendoza.
Also hot, right? A hot area.
Yes. It's a hot area, but much better soils, and you don't have mosquitoes there.
Much better. And were you drinking wine as a kid or not? I mean, was wine? I mean, wine is such a part of Argentina's culture, isn't it? Even more so then.
Yes, yes, but I must confess that I started drinking wine when I did this internship in Lagarde. I went to a college that was technical. So in the last year of the college, when I was 18, I had to do practice for 1 complete month in a winery.
So you were 18? Yeah.
18, yes.
Yeah.
I went to Lagarde, the very traditional winery from Mendoza, and I practiced. I was staying there 1 month. So that was when, with my friends from the college, we shift to drinking cola with the asados to drinking wine with the asados. It was a big switch. Yes, we then
cola,
learned,
not Fernet. Not, you were too young to drink Fernet, were you?
Not, yes, too young, but some for them maybe too. But yes, we learned at 18 that meat was much better paired with wine than with cola.
That's definitely true. So you did this internship at Lagarde, then you decided to study agronomy, didn't you? At the Universidad Nacional de Cuyo in Mendoza, where you live. That was your next step. And then after that, you went to France, which is very unusual. You went to the very prestigious, École Normale Supérieure Agronomique in Montpellier, I think, in 2001. I'm presuming you were studying in French, were you?
Yes, but I went to France, but the main studies I did in Mendoza, because at that moment there was an agreement from the University of Mendoza, and most of the professors came to Argentina. So I made the courses here in French, but in Mendoza.
Ah, okay. And what did you learn from those French professors? I mean, you went to Montpellier as well, a little bit, didn't you?
Yes.
What did you learn from them at that time? This was, the start of the 21st century, 2001.
Exactly. Well, it was amazing because my partners in doing this master degree were my professors from the university. So imagine that we were all open our heads to new knowledge. And the most important thing that I learned at that moment was how to think. So it was not the knowledge, but how to get the knowledge. Because in my university, when I did these agronomic studies, they give you books and they give you also notes to study, and you have to learn this and then repeat that in the exam.
And you pass.
And you pass. But then in the master degrees, they say, okay, if you want to learn about this, you have to read what the researchers are doing. So instead of reading books, we started reading papers, like these scientific papers that are 2, 3, 10 pages with a lot of information.
In French, yeah?
In French, in English, and most of them are in French or in English. But they have a scientific method of getting the knowledge. So they have an introduction, and then the materials, and then the main information from these trials, and then a conclusion. So you need to read all that to understand what they are trying to understand.
So it wasn't so much the knowledge, it was how you acquired the knowledge and how you processed the knowledge.
Exactly.
That's what you're saying. Yeah.
Exactly. And that set my mind for my whole life, because from then, I was at that moment 26 years. I understand that there is a lot of knowledge that is not available, especially in agriculture and especially in viticulture, because something that you try in the northern hemisphere or even in Chile, for example, may be very different in Mendoza, because the conditions for the growing grapes are completely opposite. So you need to do your own trials in your place to see what happens when you try different things.
And think for yourself, yeah?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And that's very exciting.
Yeah, because, I think it is.
Yeah.
I mean, after you'd finished, this master's, you started working as a consultant, viticulturist. So, you were a viticulturist before you were a winemaker, as we'll learn later, in Argentina, yes, but also in Paraguay. I didn't know there were vineyards in Paraguay. What were you planting in Paraguay?
Well, there are a few. That was a very funny story, because I met some guys that were European. It was a Canadian, a Belgian guy, and a French guy that they wanted to plant vineyards in Paraguay. They had like 30,000 hectares of land in what is called the Chaco Paraguayo, that is the west part of Paraguay. A quite hot area.
So close to Argentina, yeah? Close to Argentina.
Very close to Argentina, yes, to the side of Bolivia, to the side of the Andes. But it's a flat area, and What the story was that these guys, they met in Arabia Saudita. So I could never find what were they doing there. So
because there's no alcohol in Saudi Arabia.
Yes,
right?
and so they were years without drinking alcohol. And what they did for having something similar to wine, they put a fruit juice from the supermarket with some yeast from bread for making bread. They put it in a pan and ferment it, and they drink that. So they said to me, okay, we want to plant a vineyard, and if we get a wine that is better than the fruit juice with the yeast made in a pan, we are happy with that.
So what did you plant?
So we planted mainly varieties that we thought could work well in warm climate, like Tanat, Cabernet Franc, and I think 1 hectare of Malbec too.
Yeah.
But the problem there was not only the lack of cold in the winter that helps the plant to have a proper cycle of winter and summer. But the problem were the birds, the wasps, everything that eat the grapes. So I stopped advertising them. And then I don't know how is the project now. Maybe it has been eaten by the ants.
Yeah, we've got to find out, I think, yeah. Anyway, you came to join Doña Paula, where you've been ever since, I think 2006.
Yes.
Who took you there? Was Eddie Del Popolo there, our mutual friend? Right. Okay.
Eddie hired me.
Yeah.
At that moment, Doña Paula was in a huge process of growing. So Eddie was like, he had too much work at that moment. So he asked me to help him plant. We had to plant 350 hectares in 2 years.
Wow.
Was a lot of work, developing 2 new vineyards in Uco Valley. So it was a lot of work, very crazy years.
350 hectares in 2 years.
Yes.
That's unbelievable.
It was a lot of work. Fortunately, we did it very well on the vineyards. They are the best vineyards today of Doña Paula in terms of they're very well planted. I learned a lot from Eddie.
And this was called Terroir in Focus, wasn't it? The project that you were doing.
That was started later. So Terroir in Focus, because the plantation were 2006 and 7. And in 2013, we started with Terroir in Focus. That is a project that the idea is to make science and to study how terroir affects the quality of the grapes. And that's what I have been doing in the last 10 or more years.
And you're still doing that, really? Yeah.
Yes, studying. Yes.
I mean, I think you told me once you've dug 1,000 soil pits. We'll talk about soil pits in a minute, these calicatas. And you did 800 micro-vinifications just at the start, didn't you, to work out which vineyards were best suited to which varieties and rootstocks, I suppose. That
was the first phase, which is the best varieties for each vineyard or for each region in which we work. But then the second stage was to see which part of the vineyard developed the best grapes for each kind of wine, and that was amazing, and it's something that we are still learning.
Yeah.
One of the things that we started to see is that the aging potential of the wine varied a lot inside the vineyard according to the type of soil. So today we use that information to separate the grapes that we use for our different wines.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very French idea. You learned a lot, as you said, from French methods of investigation, that a vineyard parcel, which is, 5 meters away from another vineyard parcel, can give you completely different grapes. But I think, maybe 20 years ago, people weren't thinking like that in Argentina, were they?
No. And in fact, we thought that it was the opposite, because when I studied agronomic engineer, maybe I listened the word terroir 2 or 3 times, but we never...
Really?
Yeah, we never studied that. And why? Because they say terroir is related to how the soil in dry farmed areas, how the soil give the water to the plant. And it will depend on the texture, on the depth of the soil, on the type of mother rock. But then we learned that even if we here in Argentina, we irrigate, so we can manage the water status of the plant, there are a lot of other things that also have a big influence according to the type of soil. So, yeah, and also we have a huge influence of different type of climates, according to the altitude, according to the distance to the sea.
I think a lot of people don't realize that Mendoza goes from, Winkler 5, which is the equivalent of North Africa, to Winkler 1, which would be Champagne or something like that. So it's very varied within one big region, isn't it?
Yeah, and only 1 hour drive in your car.
So 1 hour from North Africa to Champagne.
Yes, it's very crazy.
Tell us a bit more about these soil pits, these calicatas, because I've been into lots of soil pits with you, looking at soils. How much of what you learn from them is science and database, and how much is intuition and observation, that you're looking at stuff and saying, okay, maybe the data's not telling me something, but I'm understanding what I'm looking at through experience, I suppose?
Yes, I guess it's a mixture of situations. There are some things that I have learned that winemaking and grape growing is not math. So it's not a direct relation. There are some things that sometimes you cannot understand at the beginning, but when you start to see like a pattern of repetition, then you learn that you have something there.
Yeah.
So maybe if you do 20 calicatas, you learn nothing. But when you do 800 or 1,000, you start to understand things. So one of the first things that I started to understand looking from calicatas is that the calcaire that we have is a calcaire that is accumulated in our soils by the aging of the soils. So our soils, most of the soils of Mendoza are quite young. They have less than 2,000 or 3,000 years. They are very young. Why? Because we live next to the Andes. There are a huge wall of unstable material that whenever you have a flood or a river or even the wind may bring this material and deposit in the foothills. So you have permanently material coming from the Andes in different ways and accumulated in the foothills of the Andes. But in some special areas of these foothills, something happens that make a part of that foothills to age more than the average, to stop being covered by new material. And when that happens, when that soil ages, they start to accumulate calcium carbonate. And after watching hundreds and hundreds of pits, I saw that there was a pattern in which this calcium carbonate was precipitated at the depth of 30 to 1 meter, 30 centimeters to 1 meter depth. And usually between the sand that was brought by the wind and the stones that were brought by the rivers. And that's very typical.
And does the calcium carbonate come from the Andes? Because the Andes were underwater, weren't they, at one point?
Well, according to this theory, no.
No.
You may have, but it's very, very weird to find it in our area. You may have some calcaire coming from the mountains, but most of the calcaire, in my theory, we can discuss with different producers, is produced, synthesized in the place. It's just a reaction, a chemical reaction, and I have done it. There is in my Instagram, there is a video where I put sparkling water with soil, and then I filter that, and what you get is calcaire. And that's,
okay.
Yes. And so in that video, I compare what do you do? What happens if you put 2 filters with soil? In one you add still water. In the other one, you add sparkling water. What you get in one side is nothing, it's because after the water is evaporized, you get nothing. In the other one, with the sparkling water, what you get out of the filter is you get water with calcium carbonate. So when that evaporates, you get the calcium carbonate deposit on the bottom of your glass.
How interesting.
Yes, it's very interesting. And that's how the calcaire is produced in natural conditions. It's very explained in many books.
Interesting. Tell us a bit more about Mendoza. I mean, we've talked about, this Winkler difference, North Africa to Champagne, but the main two areas, equality areas, would be Luján de Cuyo, which is part of the Primera Zona, the first zone, close to the city of Mendoza, and then the Uco Valley. Just tell us briefly the difference between them in terms of altitude and soil types. There are massive differences, aren't there?
Yes. Yes, there are many. I try to simplify the north part of Mendoza in talking like we have three terraces. So we have the east, the east that is farther away from the Andes, 40, 60 kilometers away from the Andes, and is the lower area around 600, 700 meters of elevation, and it's quite warm. So I've been there in the summers because we have with my father this farm.
This is where your dad had his farm, right?
Yes, and it's very, 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 very warm during the days and also the nights. Then you have a second terrace. You have some hills in the middle, and then you have a second terrace that is Luján de Cuyo, with an average altitude of 900 to 1,000 meters, even 1,100 meters. Because of this place being higher, is much colder. So on average, when I leave home every day, I have the thermometer in my car. So on average, I have from home to Luján de Cuyo, where we have the wineries, 8 degrees of difference in the morning. So it's 8 degrees colder. If I have, for example, 10 degrees one day in springtime here in my house, is 2 degrees in Luján de Cuyo. It's a huge difference.
So your house is in the east, is it?
No, my house is in the Mendoza city.
In the city, right?
It's closer to the Andes than the east, but it's lower than Luján de Cuyo.
And then the third terrace is the Uco Valley, is it?
And the third terrace is Uco Valley. It's separated by some small hills that we call cerrillos, that literally mean small hills. So, and then you have there the third terrace with vineyards planted from 1,000 meters to 1,600 meters of elevation. And so the distance goes in the east from average 50 kilometers to the Andes. Luján de Cuyo is on average 20 kilometers to the Andes, and Uco Valleys go from 15 to 0 kilometers to the Andes. So it's much colder, much closer, and it's because if it's higher, it's colder too.
Very interesting. And the highest vineyards would be where El Espinillo or something like that in 1,600 meters? Yeah.
Yes, quite extreme. And there are some crazy guys planting vineyards at 2,000 meters of elevation.
Yeah, they frosted and died, I think.
Most of them are dead now. But I don't know, maybe with the climate change in 10 years, they will be producing grapes.
And what about the different terroir within the Uco Valley? Because again, there are big differences between the southern end and the northern end and the middle, really. Which are the best areas for you and for which grapes?
Well, that's a big discussion and depend on what you think is the best wine. For example, when you go to the south of Uco Valley in San Carlos, the texture that you get in the wines are more refined, are more velvety, and the wine are a little bit more expressive from my point of view. They have more red fruit, they have more herbal and floral notes. While if you go to the north of Uco Valley, that is a little bit higher, a little bit more stony, you get more texture, you get more thick wines and more black fruit.
And more color, often more in the grapes?
Yes, definitely. Especially when you go to high vineyards. So for me, there are, and in the other way, the other thing is that you, depending on the variety, for example, the highlands of Tupungato maybe are not the best for Cabernet Sauvignon. They might be a little bit too cold, and then it's a little bit challenging. The Cabernet are a little bit hard in terms of tannins. So it depends on the variety.
So Cabernet Sauvignon would be better in the middle of the valley, would it? Maybe
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Or maybe even in Tupungato, that is north, but in not very high lands.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about vintages, I think, because people who don't know Argentina think it's a hot place, continental desert climate, all the vintages are the same. We know that vintages are very different. And it's very interesting. You're on your Instagram, which I think is M Kaiser 75, isn't it?
Yes.
You often put this little map where, it's a grid really, where you're showing, precipitation and heat really. So how much rainfall there is and how hot the vintages are. And they vary massively, Is this related to El Niño and La Niña, or are there other factors which are influencing these very different vintages that you get in Argentina?
They are supposed to be very related with El Niño and La Niña. For example, the 2016, there was a very strong El Niño.
Very wet,
so
yeah.
It was very wet and extremely cold, not only in Argentina, but in Chile too. This year it was supposed to be El Niño, but it was very, very dry. So, this phenomenon are not every year equal. So sometimes you have El Niño and it's dry in Mendoza because we are not so attached to the Pacific. We are indirectly related with the Pacific.
And is that changing with climate change? Do you think the climate change is almost playing with El Niño and La Niña?
Well, I don't know. I'm not a specialist in El Niño or La Niña, but I'm sure that is affecting our area. So a few years ago, I used to think that Mendoza was a little bit isolated from climate change because we didn't see in the register a big increase in temperature. Mm-hmm. But from the last 6 years, we have had 3 quite warm vintages. So that's like a high frequency for this kind of phenomenon. Mm-hmm. And the 2024 was hot too.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. But you started out as a viticulturist. I mean, I still think your biggest kind of passion is being in the vineyards. But in 2020, you got this new job, didn't you? So, I mean, you've always made a bit of wine. You're now director of viticulture and enology. And I just, was it hard to make the switch to winemaking? And do you think that being a viticulture guy, in a sense, made it a bit easier for you to switch?
Well, I think I have been the last 4 years the guy making a stupid question in the winery. And then, but some of the questions were not so stupid and may result in a good idea. So I've been learning a lot. And I think the most important thing is to know what do you want to get in your wines. There are a couple of things that are very clear for us. One of them is that our wines need to reflect a terroir because we communicate terroir. All our wines are related to a vineyard or a region or a variety of grape. So that must be respected. And the other thing is that we need to... I think it's a learning process, not only from Doña Paula, but all the Argentinian industry has learned a lot in the last 20 years. It has been dramatic change, and you can tell better than me how our wine industry has changed. The thing is that we are learning what make a wine a great wine. When I started working in Doña Paula 18 years ago, the goal was to make the as concentrated wine as possible. That was the goal. So all that we did in the vineyard and in the winery was trying to get a more powerful wine. And then we quickly realized that we could do very, very dense and concentrated wine, but they were kind of hard to drink. That kind of wine, when you drink it today, they are fantastic. So I drink Selección de Bodega from 2006 and 7, and the wine is fantastic, but I needed 15 years in the bottle. Yeah. So for me, it's a little bit unfair to sell a wine and tell the consumer, the one that pays for that bottle, okay, this wine is very good, but if you expect 10 years, it would be great, because almost nobody can keep a wine 10 years or thinking a wine in 10 years time. So
especially now, I think, do you?
Especially now. And my goal is to make the same wine with the same quality, if you can talk about quality, but make it in so excited to be drink today as it will be in 10 years term.
I mean, one of the other things you developed are these single vineyard wines. You talked a little bit about this, about what you did at the start with Eddie del Popolo, but also this terroir in Focus project. I just wondered, how many single vineyards do you make, and what makes a vineyard better on its own as opposed to being part of a blend? Is it just the fact that it's unique, or does it have to be more than that?
I think you can do, if you are very strict in terms of what is a great wine, maybe you have more tools to do a great wine if you blend grapes from different places. But at the same time, you lose a lot of identity in the wine. And somehow, when talking about perfection in a wine, what is perfection in a wine? For me, a wine needs to have personality. And that personality, you get it when that wine is reflecting the place. So you may have when you see these very talented young guys that have been practicing, I don't know, in China or in Japan or anywhere in the world, that they are perfectly technical music players, but they lack a little bit of soul. So that soul, you get it when you relate the wine with the place. Because then the wine is telling a story. The wine is telling a story. It's telling, okay, this is me. This is how I am because I come from this place. When you mix the grapes from different places, you lose that story.
Yeah. So both are good, but they're just different. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Just tell me a little bit about Malbec. And I know you like Cabernet Sauvignon as well, and other things. You've got Ancillotta. What else have you got? You've got all sorts of things. What have you got planted there? You've got all sorts of things.
We have more than 20 varieties planted in our vineyard.
Yeah, there we go, you see. But is Malbec Argentina's best red variety, do you think?
Well, I would say that by far, yes. If you, not talking about my opinion, but the figures. So it represents more than 50% of the wine exported by Argentina. Yes, it's also the most planted red variety in our place. And the other thing that makes it special is that it's not the same. You don't get the same result in other parts of the world. So that makes it more easier for us to sell it. Because 3 of every 4 bottles of Malbec in the world are produced in Argentina.
From Argentina, yeah. And it's diverse, isn't it? You know, in terms of style, not just regions, sub-regions within regions, but bigger regions. You know, the north is very different to the south and center, as it were, where you are.
Exactly. It's diverse, but it performs very well in very different conditions.
Everywhere, yeah. So
everywhere it's the most in Argentina.
Yeah, everywhere in Argentina.
If you go outside Argentina, it performs more or less well, but it's more difficult. It's a quite challenging variety outside our conditions. Yeah.
Because it's tannic, is it?
It might be very tannic in places where you don't have it's not dry enough, or you don't have hot days enough in the summer. Yeah, it loves warm, dry places.
Tell us quickly about white varieties, because I mean, I remember years ago that Doña Paula used to make a Sauvignon Blanc, you still do, called Los Cardos, Sauvignon Blanc. And at the end of the day, tasting red wines, I would be dying for a glass of Los Cardos Sauvignon Blanc. It was one of the first
crisp white wines made in Argentina. Are the white wines in Argentina now getting the recognition they deserve, do you think, finally?
I think they are growing as a category. People, the average Argentinian people is quite attached to the red wines, but in the young people, they are drinking, in some cases, more white wine than red wine.
Wow.
So I think there is a big move to the white wine. We have been, as an industry, we have been tasting different grapes in different places with great results and making more exciting the category. So now I can say that the white category is as diverse as the red category in Argentina.
And you make Chardonnay, don't you? Obviously, I mean, you make very good Riesling as well.
Yes, exactly. We produced these 3 white varieties. We have planted some Semillon, but we don't have any bottle yet. But as Riesling, Semillon, Chenin Blanc, Albarino, they perform very well.
Torrontés? Do you like Torrontés?
Torrontés too, but for me, Torrontés, there are you need quite special conditions and a very, very careful winemaking for not having, opinion on my taste, not having too aromatic Torrontés, too floral or too oily.
Tell us, have you ever made wine anywhere else? I mean, would you like to? I mean, you're part of a bigger group which includes Santa Rita in Chile. Have you ever gone over the border and made Chile and the other side? Sorry, made wine on the other side of the Andes in Chile?
Yes, I have not. Maybe in the future, but I think I wake up every day thinking how I can do better the wines that we do, and I think we haven't got the perfection yet. So I don't want to distract making wine somewhere else.
So you wouldn't go to France or Spain, or I mean, lots of Argentinians in Spain at the moment.
Yeah, or maybe in the future. I think if we do the wines that we say, okay, we got it. This is perfect. We cannot improve this anymore. So I can go for a next challenge. But
everything has to get 100 points.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. We need many 100 points, and then maybe I get bored.
Tell us a little bit about your lifestyle, because you're one of the few vegetarians I know, at least in the wine industry. I think you've been, how many years have you been vegetarian? 4 or 5?
5 years now. Yes.
Yeah. And what was it? Was it your diet? Was it a moral choice in a sense? And do you feel under social pressure when you go out and everybody wants you to have an asado or give you an empanada full of meat?
Well, yes, there are some pressure, but no, not so much. Not so much. My friends, I thought when I decided to stop eating meat, I thought that my friends would make more pressure on me. Like, how do you call it? Bowling? No,
yeah.
Bullying.
Bullying. Yeah.
Yes, there are some bullying, but no, it was not very serious. Well, the decision to make it is kind of moral. I don't know how to call it, but it was a concern of that I really loved eating meat and asados. I used to have 2, 3, 4 asados a week. But then since I studied how we produce the meat, I had a noise in my head that says, okay, you're getting a lot of pleasure by the suffering of some animals. So that equation, yes. So that equation didn't close in my mind. So it took me a lot of time, but then I decided to stop eating meat.
Well, I mean, you look very well on it. So, but I think it's partly because you're very sporty, as we say in English. I know that you like the mountains, as we said. You're in the mountains this morning. I know you like running, don't you? Are those the main things you do outside wine? Those 2 things?
Yes, part of my family. Yes, but I took some time from my family to be in the mountains and running. There is I like to race a race that is in the Aconcagua, in the foot of the Aconcagua, every summer.
You've climbed Aconcagua, haven't you? I think you said to me, did I want to come? And I was too old by the time you were climbing it.
Yes, I climbed in 2019.
And what was it like? What was the view from the top like? Amazing?
It's amazing. And there are some things that you cannot understand, because when you are in base camp, you are surrounded by very tall peaks, like 5,000 meter peaks. And then you have the Aconcagua in one side, but you cannot see the top of the Aconcagua because it's very massive and you have some things in the middle. But that's very high hills of 5,000 meters. When you're in top of the Aconcagua, they look flat because you're looking from the up. So you have 2,000 more meters above. It's incredible.
Amazing. Listen, Martín, I know your family is waiting for you to go and have lunch. We're chatting on a Sunday lunchtime, and you're not having an asado, but they might be having an asado, so they might be ready. Anyway, fascinating. We could talk for at least another hour, but at least we're also doing an Instagram live. So anybody who wants to hear more about the wines and the way they're made and other facets of the conversation, do tune into that as well. Martín, it's been fantastic talking to you, and I'll see you very soon. I hope in Argentina, probably February next year.
I hope so. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Tim.
See you, my friend.
Bye-bye. See ya.
Bye.
You can see why Martín is so good at his job, and he has a real gift for passing on his knowledge. Next week on Cork Talk, my guest is David Baverstock from the Winestone Group in Portugal. Join me then. Thanks for listening to Cork Talk. If you want to read more reports, articles and tasting notes by me, go to my website, timatkin.com. You can also follow me on Twitter @TimAtkin and on Instagram @TimAtkinMW. See you next week.